He laughed, not a small laugh, but a booming, mocking laugh that shook the room. Filipino martial arts, he sneered, spinning on his heel to face the crowd. Child's play, let me show you real kung fu. The audience gasped. Cameras flashed, phones pointed. Everyone wanted to see the famous Grandmaster Liang in action. They had heard stories of his unbeatable skills, his lightning-fast punches, his spins that could knock down a wall. And now, he was here, mocking someone else's fighting style. But across the room, quiet and unassuming, stood a young Filipino fighter. His shirt was simple, his stance calm, his eyes sharp. His name was Marco. He didn't laugh, he didn't flinch. He just nodded politely. Liang smirked. Come on, show me what you've got. Marco didn't move, he waited. And that's when the unexpected happened. Liang charged first, fast as a striking cobra. The crowd cheered. They thought Marco had no chance. But Marco didn't dodge. He didn't strike. He moved like water, soft, flowing, but impossibly precise. Liang's fist swished past, cutting only air. The next punch, same. Every attack from the Kung Fu master, every spin, every kick. Marco seemed to melt around it, his movements impossible to predict. The crowd fell silent. Whispers grew. How is he doing that? Liang's face twisted. He was confused, frustrated, angry. He had never faced anyone like this. And then, just when he thought he had an opening, Marco struck. Not with a loud, flashy kick or punch, but a small, sharp, almost invisible strike. Liang staggered. Shock filled his eyes. The audience gasped so loudly it was like thunder. Marco's next moves were a blur. Every time Liang attacked, Marco responded in ways no one expected, redirecting force, slipping around strikes, countering with the kind of precision that could end a fight in seconds. But he wasn't cruel, he wasn't violent. It was art. In 10 minutes, the entire room realized something shocking. The legendary Kung Fu master, undefeated for decades, was being outclassed by a quiet young fighter he had mocked without even knowing his name. Liang stumbled, then fell to one knee. He looked at Marco, and for the first time in his life, he saw fear in himself. Marco extended a hand. It's not about who is stronger, he said softly. It's about respect. Liang's laughter was gone. The arrogance gone, only silence remained. The crowd didn't move, they didn't breathe. They were witnessing history, and no one would ever forget that day. The room was quiet, too quiet. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Marco didn't smile, didn't gloat. He only adjusted his stance, calm and ready. Liang wiped sweat from his forehead. His pride hurt more than his body. How could a young fighter, someone he had never heard of, move like that? Who are you? Liang demanded, his voice tight with disbelief. I'm Marco, the young man said simply. I train in Filipino martial arts, and I respect all fighters. But respect must be earned. Liang laughed, but it was bitter. Earned? You're lucky I don't finish this right now. The crowd shifted nervously. Some cheered Marco. Some stayed loyal to Liang. But one thing was clear. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Liang lunged again, faster than before. He spun, kicked, twisted, a hurricane of motion. Marco didn't back down. He flowed like water, ducking low, pivoting, redirecting Liang's force. Every move Marco made seemed impossible. He was predicting the master before Liang even thought. Then, something strange happened. Liang's foot caught on the floor. A tiny misstep, but Marco saw it. And instead of hitting him hard, he struck lightly, just enough to unbalance Liang. Liang stumbled, nearly falling. The room gasped. He had been defeated, not by strength, but by precision. Impossible, Liang shouted. This is not Kung Fu. Marco took a deep breath. It doesn't matter what you call it. Fighting isn't about showing off. It's about understanding your opponent, your own body, and your limits. Liang's eyes narrowed, rage boiled inside him. But under it, something else stirred. Curiosity. He had fought the best of the best. He had never met anyone like Marco. The young fighter nodded, as if he could read Liang's thoughts. If you want, I can teach you. Liang froze. The crowd went silent. Was the master asking to learn? Yes, Marco said softly. Everyone can improve. Even a master. For a moment, the room held its breath. And then, Liang smiled. A small, reluctant smile. It was the first time anyone had seen the great Grandmaster Liang smile during a fight. And that smile changed everything. After that moment, the atmosphere in the room changed. What was once a mocking spectacle turned into something almost sacred. People whispered. Phones still filmed, but no one dared interrupt. Liang, the undefeated kung fu master, had just faced defeat, not by strength, but by strategy, precision, and respect. Marco stepped back, lowering his guard. "You don't have to fight me," he said. "You can choose to learn," Liang's chest heaved. He had always been the one teaching, the one proving himself. To admit he could learn from someone else? That was new, humbling, painful. He looked at Marco. Really looked. Not at the young fighter, not at his stance, not at his moves, but at his eyes. They were calm, but focused, confident, but not arrogant. It was a kind of confidence Liang had not seen in decades. "Very well," Liang said finally, his voice low. "I will learn, but first, a rematch." The crowd erupted. Phones raised again. "A rematch!" They shouted. Some cheered for Marco, some for Liang. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. The two fighters squared off. This time it wasn't about pride. It wasn't about mocking or proving dominance. It was about respect, about understanding, about showing the world that martial arts was more than flashy moves. Liang moved first. This time he tested Marco differently, faster, sharper, more unpredictable. Marco didn't just respond, he flowed, he adapted. Each time Liang struck, Marco found the opening not to destroy, but to teach. "See?" Marco whispered under his breath as they moved. "Your strength is wasted if your mind is closed." Liang faltered mid-spin. His hands froze in the air. He realized something terrifying and thrilling at the same time. He had underestimated Filipino martial arts for decades. He had mocked it publicly, and yet here he was, learning from a style he had once called child's play. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Each exchange between them was a story. Pain, struggle, humility, and sudden brilliance. Liang's attacks were no longer aggressive, they were thoughtful. Marco's counters were no longer defensive, they were instructive. Then it happened, the move that no one expected. Liang tried a spinning kick, his signature move that had won him thousands of fights. Marco didn't dodge, he didn't block. He simply sidestepped, guiding Liang's momentum harmlessly into the mat. Liang hit the floor, stunned. The room fell silent. No one had seen that before, not from Marco, not from Liang. It was artistry. Liang lay there for a moment, then slowly sat up. He looked at Marco and laughed. But it wasn't mocking, it was genuine, humbled, free. "You've taught me more in an hour than I have learned in 40 years, Liang said. His voice shook. I misjudged your art." It's never about who is better. Smiled. It's about who is willing to learn. From that day on, their story went viral, not because of who won or lost, but because of what they taught the world. Pride could fall, respect could rise, and even the greatest master could be humbled by humility and skill. The cameras kept rolling, phones kept filming, but no one moved. Everyone wanted to remember this moment. The moment when arrogance met grace, when power met wisdom, and when a quiet young fighter changed the world in a way no one expected. And in the end, it wasn't about the fight at all. It was about the lesson. True mastery comes not from mocking others, but from learning from them. After the fight, Marco walked outside into the cool evening air. The crowd had dispersed, but whispers of the showdown followed him everywhere. Everyone wanted to know who he was, where he came from, and how a quiet Filipino fighter could humble the legendary Grandmaster Liang. Marco didn't care about fame. He cared about something else, something deeper. Martial arts wasn't about showing off. It was about respect, balance, and discipline. But he knew this victory would change things. It could inspire others, or it could stir jealousy. Meanwhile, Liang sat in his private dojo replaying the fight in his mind. His pride was bruised, but a strange sense of excitement grew inside him. He had been challenged in a way he'd never expected. For the first time, he felt alive. He called his assistant. "Prepare the training hall. I'm going to learn from him." The next day, the story went viral. Social media exploded with clips of Marco's impossible moves. Headlines screamed, "Kung Fu Master defeated by young Filipino fighter." Some criticized Liang's arrogance. Others praised Marco's skill. But everyone was talking about it. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Marco returned to his small dojo in Manila. He trained silently, alone, practicing the techniques that had surprised the world. Every strike, every step, every pivot was perfect, but he didn't do it for attention. He did it to master himself. A week later, Liang arrived in Manila. The master had traveled halfway across the world to learn, not to fight, but to understand. Marco welcomed him with a simple bow. "I hope you're ready to learn," Marco said. Liang nodded, humbled. "I am." "Teach me." The two spent hours together. Liang's movements, once rigid and precise, became fluid. Marco's guidance transformed him. Every session pushed Liang beyond what he thought he knew. The master who had mocked Filipino martial arts was now a student, learning the secrets he had ignored for decades. Outside their dojo, crowds gathered. They wanted to witness this unlikely pairing, the world's most famous kung fu master training under the guidance of a young Filipino fighter. And every day, the videos went viral again. Millions of views pouring in from all corners of the world. But the unexpected didn't end there. One evening, after an intense training session, a group of international fighters appeared outside Marco's dojo. They had come with challenges, boasting their styles, eager to see if the Filipino fighter could back up his reputation. Marco didn't hesitate. He accepted, not with arrogance, but with calm confidence. The fights were relentless. Each opponent brought something new: fast strikes, heavy kicks, tricky grapples. But Marco's movements were always precise. He adapted, using his Filipino martial arts to redirect, to defend, to teach. Every fight ended not in humiliation, but in demonstration of skill and respect. Liang watched in awe. Every day he learned more than he had in 40 years. He had been humbled, shocked, and inspired, all in the same week. And then the real test came: a global martial arts tournament. Fighters from every continent had heard of Marco. The media called it the fight of the century. The arena was packed, live cameras broadcasting to millions worldwide. And in the center, Marco stood calm, focused, ready. The first round was fierce. Opponents underestimated him. Some tried brute force, others tried trickery. Marco flowed like water, striking with speed, precision, and wisdom. Every move left the crowd gasping. Then, in the final round, a mysterious fighter stepped into the ring. His reputation was legendary. No one had ever beaten him. He moved with power, aggression, and experience. The arena held its breath. Liang whispered to Marco, "Be careful." "This one is different." Marco simply nodded. He had learned to face every challenge with calm focus. And what happened next stunned the world. The fight was intense. Each strike and counter amazed the crowd. But Marco didn't rely on brute strength. He used his mind, his experience, his Filipino martial arts, and in a single unexpected moment, he turned the tide. A precise strike, unseen, unpredicted, landed. The legendary fighter fell. Silence. Then, eruption. Cheers that shook the arena. Marco had won. Not through arrogance, not through anger, but through calm, calculated skill and respect. Liang smiled, tears in his eyes. He had been humbled. He had learned. And the world had witnessed a story no one would forget. From that day, Marco became more than a fighter. He became a legend. Not just because he defeated masters, but because he showed the world that respect, humility, and mastery of self could triumph over arrogance, fame, and raw power. And in every corner of the globe, children began to practice Filipino martial arts, inspired by the young man who had faced a world full of doubt and turned it into something beautiful. Before Marco became the fighter the world would remember, he had been just another boy in a crowded Manila neighborhood. Life was tough, streets were noisy, families struggled, and opportunities were rare. But even as a child, Marco had a fire inside him. He would watch older boys practicing their martial arts in alleys and open fields, studying their every move. He didn't have a master at first, just determination and curiosity. Every day he practiced in secret. Early mornings before the sun touched the city, he would run barefoot through the narrow streets, punching the air, imagining opponents, flowing like water, striking like lightning. Sometimes he fell, sometimes he got hurt, but he never gave up. That was his first lesson: persistence over pride. By the time he was 16, he had trained himself in Filipino martial arts. He had no formal dojo, no medals, no fame. Just skill, focus, and a quiet confidence that he was capable of more than anyone expected. And then came the day he first heard about Liang, the legendary kung fu master. News of Liang's victories spread across Asia. Videos showed him spinning, kicking, and striking with inhuman speed. People called him unbeatable. Marco didn't envy him. He admired the mastery, but he also saw arrogance. And that's when something stirred inside him. Not anger, but a challenge. Could he, a boy from Manila with nothing but his art and heart, face someone like Liang? Years passed. Marco trained relentlessly. He sparred with anyone he could find, learning, adapting, growing. Each fight taught him something new. Each mistake became a lesson. He learned not just to strike, but to read people, to flow with energy, to turn attacks into openings. Filipino martial arts became not just his style, but his philosophy. Fight with respect, move with purpose, win with humility. Meanwhile, Liang continued his streak of victories. The world saw him as unbeatable, but Marco knew better. Strength alone was never enough. It was timing, understanding, and heart that made a true master. And that led to the fateful day. The day Marco walked into the arena and Liang laughed. From that laugh, the fight escalated. Each strike Marco took, each dodge, was a lesson not just for Liang, but for the world. Viewers at home gasped at impossible moves. Children repeated them in backyards. And martial artists debated tactics online. But the story wasn't just about fighting. It was about growth. Marco didn't mock. He didn't show off, he taught. Liang, once the arrogant master, learned humility, patience, and adaptability. Their rivalry became a partnership, a legend in the making. And in the days after the fight, Marco faced other challengers. From street fighters to seasoned professionals, everyone tested him. Some tried to imitate Liang's speed, others his power, but none could match Marco's fluid, unpredictable style. Every fight ended in respect, and every opponent left inspired rather than humiliated. One night, as Marco trained under the moonlight, he remembered his early days, the alleys, the struggles, the falls. He realized that every hardship had prepared him for this. Every challenge had built his skill and heart. And in that quiet moment, he understood something profound. True strength is not about defeating others, but about mastering yourself. By the time the global martial arts tournament came, Marco was ready. His opponents were fierce, their techniques polished, their confidence unshakable. But Marco moved like he always had, calm, precise, and unstoppable in his own rhythm. He didn't rely on force, he relied on understanding, and that was what made him unbeatable. Liang watched from the sidelines, his heart full. He saw the boy he once underestimated now become a master in his own right. And he knew something crucial. The world would never forget this lesson. Pride without humility can fall, but respect and skill will always rise. When the final fight ended, Marco raised his hands, not in arrogance, but in gratitude. The crowd erupted, cameras flashed, social media exploded. But for Marco, it wasn't about fame. It was about proving that skill, heart, and respect could change the world, one fight at a time. And as he looked toward Liang, the old master smiled, silently acknowledging that sometimes the student teaches the teacher. The arena was packed, lights blazed, cameras flashed, and the crowd roared like thunder. The global martial arts tournament had begun. Fighters from every continent had gathered. Some were champions in Taekwondo, some in karate, some in Kung Fu, and a few in lesser-known but deadly styles. But all eyes were on one man, Marco, the quiet Filipino fighter who had humbled the legendary Liang. He walked into the arena calmly, his expression unreadable. No bravado, no smirk, just focus. Liang stood at the edge of the ring, watching. He had trained under Marco, learned from him, and now he was nervous. He had seen Marco defeat masters, but the tournament was different. Marco would face fighters who had spent years perfecting their own deadly techniques. The first opponent approached, a massive man from Brazil, a capoeira champion. He spun and kicked, moving like a whirlwind, trying to overwhelm Marco. The crowd screamed, expecting Marco to struggle, but Marco flowed. Every kick was redirected, every strike absorbed and turned into opportunity. With one quick move, Marco used the man's momentum to spin him off balance. The giant stumbled and fell to the mat. The crowd went wild. Not a single person had expected such precision. The second opponent was smaller but faster, a Japanese karate champion. He struck with lightning speed, aiming for Marco's head and chest. Marco ducked, pivoted, and countered with a series of quick, invisible strikes. The opponent tried to keep up, but every move Marco made seemed to anticipate him. In the end, the karate champion bowed in respect, leaving the ring. Whispers spread through the arena. "Who is this kid? He moves like water." "No one can beat him." Marco didn't smile. He stayed focused, knowing that the toughest challenge was still ahead. The final round approached. A hush fell over the crowd. This fighter was unknown, masked, and rumored to be undefeated for 10 years in secret underground tournaments. Everyone was nervous, even Liang's hands trembled slightly. The masked fighter entered the ring. He moved silently, eyes hidden, aura tense. Marco could feel his skill immediately. This was no ordinary fighter. This was someone dangerous. The fight began. The masked fighter struck first, a flurry of fast, precise punches. Marco didn't dodge, he flowed. He redirected, absorbed, and countered. The crowd gasped at every move, some cheering, some holding their breath. Minutes passed like seconds. Each strike from the masked fighter was met with Marco's perfect counter. Every attack seemed impossible, but Marco adapted. He moved not just with skill, but with understanding. Then, the unexpected happened. The masked fighter grabbed Marco and threw him to the floor with incredible force. Marco hit the mat hard, the audience gasping. The Master Liang shouted from the sidelines, "Get up! Remember what we trained." Marco rose slowly. Pain shot through his body, but his eyes were calm. He had faced worse. He focused, remembered his years of training, the struggles, the alleyways of Manila, the lessons of humility and respect. The fight resumed. Marco flowed like never before. He moved like a shadow, striking unseen. The masked fighter faltered. He was fast, strong, and skilled, but he had never faced someone who could anticipate every move, someone who could turn every attack into an opening. And then in one final moment, Marco saw his chance. The masked fighter lunged for a finishing strike. Marco sidestepped, used the momentum, and with a single perfectly timed strike, knocked the fighter to the ground. The mask fell, revealing a familiar face. The crowd screamed. It was another legendary master, thought to be unbeatable. Marco had defeated him, not with arrogance, not with raw strength, but with skill, patience, and respect. Silence fell, then slowly applause erupted. Then cheering, then the roar of 1,000 voices. Marco raised his hands, not in triumph over his opponent, but in gratitude for the lessons learned and the journey taken. Liang ran into the ring, hugging Marco. "You've done what no one else could. You've taught the world a lesson they will never forget." Marco smiled. "It's not about defeating others. It's about mastering yourself." And with that, the arena exploded into celebration. Videos went viral. News outlets worldwide covered the story. And children everywhere practiced Filipino martial arts, inspired by the young man who had faced the world and changed it forever. From that day, Marco's name became legend, not because he defeated masters, but because he showed the world that respect, humility, and true mastery could surpass pride, arrogance, and raw power. And for the first time, the world saw that even a quiet fighter from Manila could become a hero. After the tournament, the world couldn't stop talking about Marco. Headlines blared his name across continents. The Filipino fighter who shocked the world. Master Liang, humbled by young talent. Respect over pride. A lesson in true martial arts. But Marco didn't seek fame. He returned to his small dojo in Manila, greeted by children who had watched every fight online. They stared at him with wide eyes, some timid, some eager, all inspired. He knelt down to them and spoke softly, but with authority. Martial arts isn't about proving you're better than someone else. It's about understanding yourself, respecting others, and always striving to improve. Every strike, every fall, every victory, it's a lesson. Remember that. The children nodded, some practicing punches and blocks immediately, some just staring, absorbing every word. Marco smiled quietly, teaching them, guiding them. That was his real victory. Meanwhile, Liang stayed in Manila, continuing to learn. Every day he trained under Marco's guidance. The master who had once laughed at Filipino martial arts was now a student and a changed man. His pride had melted into humility, his arrogance into patience. And together, Marco and Liang began building something new, a dojo that combined their skills, philosophies, and respect for martial arts in every form. The world watched. Videos of their training sessions went viral. Martial artists from every corner of the globe came to learn. Some to see Marco's unmatched precision, some to witness Liang's transformation, and some to understand the lesson that had humbled even the greatest master. But the most important lesson was quiet, subtle, and unforgettable. Strength alone isn't mastery. Power alone doesn't inspire. True mastery comes from respect, humility, and the courage to learn, even from those you once underestimated. Months later, a global martial arts festival invited Marco and Liang as keynote masters. Fighters from every country gathered, eager to train, learn, and compete. Marco stood in the center of the arena, looking at the sea of faces. He remembered the alleys of Manila, the early mornings, the bruises, the hard falls, the practice he had done alone for years. He realized then that all of it, the struggle, the training, the challenges, had led to this. Not fame, not money, not glory, but the chance to inspire, to teach, and to leave a legacy. Liang approached him smiling. "You've changed more than my style. You've changed me. And I think the world too," Marco nodded. That's the point of martial arts. It's never about the fight itself. It's about what you become along the way. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Marco barely noticed. He wasn't looking at the applause, the cameras, or the news coverage. He was looking at the students, the fighters, and the world he had just shown a new way to live, fight, and respect others. From that day forward, Marco's name became legend. Not because he defeated the unbeatable, not because he shocked the world, but because he reminded everyone that true mastery, respect, and courage could turn even the quietest fighter from the smallest city into a hero. And somewhere, watching quietly from the sidelines, the young fighters of the next generation whispered to themselves, "One day, I want to move like Marco." And the cycle continued, because legends aren't made by fame. They're made by heart, humility, and the courage to fight not just others, but yourself. And that was the story of the Filipino fighter who humbled a master, changed the world, and proved that respect and skill could conquer pride and power. And that's the story of how a quiet Filipino fighter changed the world, humbled a master, and showed that true strength comes from respect, humility, and heart. Every journey has lessons. Sometimes the biggest victories aren't about defeating others, but about mastering yourself. If today's story inspired you, remember that courage and determination can come from the most unexpected places, even from the streets of Manila. From all of us here at Philippines Wealth Chronicles, thank you for watching, and may your own journey be filled with lessons, growth, and unexpected victories.